All right. Hey, what's up, Greg?
What's going on?
So I was really happy to be able to talk to you today and get an interview with you. You and I know each other, and I know a little bit about your story, but I feel it's powerful and it's important to share with other people. So tell me a little bit about, about your history, your upbringing. Where are you from?
My upbringing. So I was born in Jamaica Plain in 1964 on Sedgwick Street. All my family lived in Jamaica Plain. My cousins, my grandparents, everybody was in Jamaica Plain. They came here in 1949 and settled in Roxbury, in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood. When I was 2 years old, we moved to Sharon, a suburb of Boston, way out on the South Shore, and that's where I grew up for the formative years of my life. 9-10 years maybe in Sharon. And then it was a series of bouncing around from one town to another. We bounced around all over the place, going town to town. Norwood, back to Sharon, Brighton, Norfolk, Brookline, Hingham, all kinds of places. And that's what it was. I grew up, my family was some dysfunction in there, I'm not going to lie. It was rough. I'd say around the age of maybe 12, 11. My sister got into drugs. There was strife in the house all the time and stuff like that, And that's what we dealt with growing up. So, yeah. It wasn't all the greatest. I mean, there was good times, but it wasn't always the greatest. But I think I was raised by a good family. They instilled morals in us,
Okay.
I think that was big,
So, when you were a young man, something happened that drastically changed your life. I'm going to leave it up to you if you want to discuss that. But it landed you in prison. I know that.
Yeah, I was 17 years old at the time. I had just turned 17. And I had been out with friends one evening in the summer of 1981, May of 1981. And somehow I got separated from my friends. We were down in Copley Square, and some guy was trying to take advantage of me. I could tell he was circling the block in his car. I knew what he was trying to do. And I figured I'd turn the tables on the guy and rob him, And I got in his car. We drove to some remote area in some alley in Brookline, whatever, and right on the Boston line on Beacon Street. And I told him to give me his money, and he fought me. I thought he would just give me his money, but he fought me back. He started grabbing me and everything, and it turned real ugly. I had my knife out already in my hand at that time, and I guess I thought I was punching him, but I was stabbing him, I guess. And it was very horrific. I sort of blacked out. There's so many things I remember about it, but it was mostly in a blackout state. But they came and arrested me like 4 days later at my house in Jamaica Plain, where I was living at the time, and brought me down to police headquarters, went through the whole thing, and I was out on bail. I went to jail, got out on bail. And subsequently, in November of 1981, I was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. It's tough.
It was it's rough for a 17-year-old, to be sentenced. Scared to death. I was scared to death. I thought I was going to be in trouble going in there, but I didn't have problems in prison.
Okay. So how long did you end up spending incarcerated?
Altogether, over 37 years.
Wow.
So I did 34 years, just over 34. And I was released in 2016, 15 on parole, due to changes in juvenile life laws in Massachusetts and around the country. And I was out for almost 2.5 years, and I got parole violated and went back to prison for another 2.5. So that's how it comes out to over 37 years. Inside.
So spending that much time in the Massachusetts prison system, tell me some of the prisons that you spent time in, and like what were your experiences? And like it's kind of a long-winded question, but like I also would be curious to know like what are your thoughts about how the prison system has evolved since you were in there?
Yeah, so I was in Walpole for the first 3.5 years of my sentence. Walpole, as you know, was one of the most notorious prisons in the country at one point through the 1970s and 60s. I came in at the tail end of all the mayhem, but let me tell you, Walpole was still Walpole back then. You know, it was a place you had to learn quick to grow up. You had to carry yourself a certain way, and I learned quick, believe me. You know, I learned to just be respectful to people. Don't steal nothing. You know, mind your business. Don't be a snitch. You know, don't cooperate with the administration. You know, when there's any investigations or anything going on, don't talk to nobody, and you'd survive well, and I did. And I ended up going in 1985 to Norfolk State Prison, and I was there for about 29.5 years.
Was that like a step up from Walpole, you think?
Oh, definitely a step up. When I got to Norfolk in 1985, I thought I walked onto a college campus. Flowers everywhere in front of the units, you know, just the green grass, you know. I came in the spring, you know, in March. And the place was just hustling and bustling. There's people everywhere. Unlike Walpole, you know, they section you off in places, everything's fenced in. Norfolk was wide open. And yeah, I went down there and I ended up working in the plumbing shop for 27 years. I worked as a plumber at MCI Norfolk. When I got there, we had all kinds of programs, you know, things that we were doing. We had theater arts program, we had Toys for Tots that me and another guy started up. They took it away years later because of tool control. They were worried that we had drills and saws and all this stuff and we could use them as weapons.
As you was making toys for the kids?
As we were making toys for children at needy hospitals throughout the Boston area, Children's Hospital and other places, you know.
Wow.
And we used to do, the Norfolk Runners Club used to do fundraisers, you know, for needy kids. We do marathons and things like that. Run the Boston Marathon in the prison and raise money for children, you know, fighting cancer and stuff like that, you know.
So while you was in prison, you were still doing a lot of like positive stuff.
Yeah, what happens, like at Walpole, I wasn't doing too many positive things, you know. But I got to Norfolk eventually, and when you get down there, you see how much is available to you. You know, there is a lot. At that time, there was a lot available.
And then the atmosphere, like the nice green, like the flowers and like the green landscape, that was good for your mental health, it sounds like.
It was great for the mental health. And the way the commissary ran, the food they sold in the commissary, guys could cook in the housing units, you know, healthy foods and fish and vegetables and different things like that, you know, you could buy in the commissary. And, you know, I ate healthy, I worked out, I worked a job every day, I get up and went to work every morning like everybody else does. And, yeah, you see the change coming after 1988, after the Willie Horton fiasco.
What was the Willie Horton fiasco?
Well, Willie Horton was a first-degree lifer who was out in a minimum security. He went out on a furlough. Apparently went down to Connecticut, right? And supposedly, you know, raped some woman in her house in front of her husband or whatever. I don't know the whole gist of it. You know, I've never really read up on it, just what I see and talked to other guys about. But at that time, Michael Dukakis was running for president, and you know, Willie Horton got snatched up and brought back into prison. But they made a big deal out of the furlough program in Massachusetts, and how Michael Dukakis was like the leader of the furlough program, giving everybody furloughs. So George Bush was basically bashing him during the campaign, you know, and it was at that point that we started getting a lot of negative media coverage within the prison. You know, after all positive, mind you, positive Toys for Tots, we were in the media, we got media publications, theater arts program, the awesome convict art players. You know, we had all these programs going on with the Lifers group. We had picnics and cookouts and all that with our families, things that we were allowed to do, because it's a medium security setting, and the way the prison was designed back when they first opened it was supposed to be a prison designed for rehabilitation and giving people a sense of community. And after 1988, that all started going downhill with negative publicity over the furlough program, and the administrators just gradually taking things away from us, taking programs. You know, they took the Toys for Tots away. You know, they were all worried about tool control. I walked around with screwdrivers and drills and all kinds of stuff all my life in prison. And they were worried about 3 or 4 guys sitting in the basement of a unit making child-safe wooden toys. You know, and that was a stab in the back. You know, just everything they took away. They took the cookouts away, the picnics that we used to have with our families. Once a year, we'd have a picnic. You know, everybody pays. The state's not paying for it. The taxpayers weren't paying for it. You know, unlike what Howie Carr would say, that all the taxpayers were footing the bill for our banquets and our picnics, which is not true. Our families pay for that. Or we pay for it out of our own
So
pocket.
all the guys were getting together. So do you feel like because all these changes, like the attitude and maybe like some of the aggression inside the prison kind of increased or got worse?
Well, what happens, you have to understand something, right? We used to have like things like Legislative Awareness Day once a year. And we'd have all these legislators come into the prison. And we would grieve our issues, you know. We want a new lifers bill. We want a 25 to life bill for first-degree lifers in Massachusetts after Willie Horton. And, you know, we have people coming and we're trying to push legislation and all that, you know, all this stuff going on. And then gradually, Legislative Awareness Day went away. The administration stopped it, wouldn't allow us to have it. They would, we would submit names of people that we want to come into lifers group meetings. We submit them ahead of time so they get approval. When we would do that, we would get denied access from the administration. They would tell us, you can't have these people coming in here. We're denying you. And the thing is, technically they can't deny those people. They're legislators and representatives who can walk into any prison anytime unannounced and get full access because they're lawmakers. And they would just, you know, it was just basically shutting everybody down. And if you challenged that, which people did, you'd be retaliated against and lugged off to some other prison because you're an instigator or you're inciting. You know, you go to a lifers meeting, you tell everybody, hey, write your representatives and senators, you know, and get your families, you know, you're inciting stuff, so they feel threatened, they want to get you out of there and they ship you out of the prison. And I saw a lot of guys go and get shipped out of the prison because of stuff they were fighting for on the inside, you know.
Guys were, they were fighting for better treatment and stuff. So
treatment and stuff.
I know you're you know, big into activism, and I know, like, you know, you did a lot of work on your own case and stuff. You know, I figure earlier is better because, like, one question I have is, you won a case. It was in the Supreme Court, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about that case because I know it's a big case in the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah. So in 2011 or 2010, I think it was, there was a United States Supreme Court ruling in Miller versus Alabama that said it was unconstitutional to give juveniles, those under the age of 18, life without the possibility of parole. It comes down to brain science, you know, and the frontal lobe, and how the child's brain isn't fully developed until maybe the age of 25, you know. So our thought processes and all that stuff, like we don't make rational decisions all the time. We're impulsive and all that stuff. They threw all that science in there, and the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional to give juveniles life without parole, but they didn't specify whether it applied retroactively. And I guess some states, southern states, had already filed prior to my case within their own Supreme Courts in their respective states asking for retroactivity on the Supreme Court's ruling, and they denied. They said no, it didn't apply retroactively. I was contacted by my attorney at the time. We were working on a motion for new trial, and he said that the attorneys at the Committee for Public Counsel Services were talking about my case about bringing it to the Supreme Court in Massachusetts on retroactivity over Miller versus Alabama. And the reason they used my case, they wanted to use my case, is I brought up the how it was unconstitutional to sentence a 17-year-old to life without the possibility of parole in 1982 on my direct appeal, which the Supreme Court denied. And they just thought it would, the irony of bringing it back 30 years later to the Supreme Court and making another argument, under Article 26 of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights and the Supreme Court ruling. And lo and behold, the 7 justices in Massachusetts agreed that it was unconstitutional and that the ruling that the U.S. Supreme Court made applies retroactively here. And that immediately made 65 of us eligible for parole. Some of us not right away. It was parole eligibility after 15 years. If a guy had 5 years in, he wouldn't see a parole board for 10 years. But he went from a first-degree life sentence without parole to the parole eligible after 15.
And then that was like the big, like the childhood lifers kind of movement, like where they started releasing a lot of childhood lifers and stuff. Yeah. That's how I found out about you, was working with guys that had been
So I wasn't the
lifers.
first one, even though my case was ruled on the Supreme Court. And by the way, we won 2 cases in the Supreme Court, not one. The second part of Diatchenko 2 was the right to counsel during a parole hearing for juveniles. There was some other guys that had their parole packages. They did them quickly before I did, and they had less time served than I did at the time. And they got their paroles. I think I was maybe the 5th juvenile lifer to get a parole, 5th or 6th. I know there were other guys in front of me, like I said, with much less time. But I wanted to make sure my parole package was done properly. We did mock hearings. I had my attorneys visiting, social workers, counselors, everybody was coming to see me. We had a great hearing. I'm not going to deny that. It went beautiful. I think the parole board was very impressed. And, they granted my parole my first time around. Went to a minimum for 1 year, pre-release. That was mind-blowing. Not having a fence around you.
Yeah, what was that like, man, after all that time, kind of like being out there and having that freedom? And
yeah, I was cuffed, man. When they took me out of Norfolk, I packed all my stuff in the van, helped them pack all my stuff. And we got to Boston pre-release in Roslindale, on Canterbury Street. And as soon as we opened the car door and I step out, the guy's like, come here, turn around. And he's like taking my cuffs off me. And I'm looking around, there's no fence around me, nothing. And I'm like, wow, this is really happening, man? Am I really out here with no fence? But the thing is, there was still an invisible fence because I wasn't allowed to leave the property.
Yeah.
So there was still an invisible fence. But I was a year closer to going home when I made it to that place, in 2015. It was good.
So, like that's a powerful story in itself. And, I have to commend you for, pushing through all that time in prison, keeping up the fight for your life and being able to get out here in the world. Now, I know at one point, like, you're very big into activism and you were, got involved, like they didn't like what you were doing, you were doing some activism stuff, and then they kind of got you where you were drinking and they put you right back in prison for that.
Yeah.
So like talk about, if you want, you can talk about that a little bit.
So I got out of prison. I had to get a job. I got a job. I was working in Harvard Square at a property management company. I had gotten invitations. People, knew that I was out in the community. I started getting like invitations to come to Harvard University and attend events and things like that. And that's what I was doing. And I would get some public speaking at Harvard Divinity School, Northeastern, LaSalle College, Curry College. Professors were interested in having me come to talk to their classrooms, or auditoriums. Some of the places were big, like Harvard, And one day, some friend reached out to me and said, "Hey, we heard that you worked 27 years in the plumbing shop at Norfolk, and you know a lot about the water in the prison and how bad it is, and the dirtiness of it and all that." And I said, "Yeah, I know everything about the water." And they said, well, we're having a meeting down at the Democracy Center in Harvard Square, and we'd like you to attend, you know. It'll be at 6:30 tonight. And I said, I'll be there. And I went down and met all these activists, you know, in the community, you know. And I joined on that night. I signed up. I love the people that I met. I signed on with them. And we began our work, and we were going out and doing slideshow presentations about water and different poisons in the water. I had done, prior to the protest at Norfolk, I had done an interview on WBUR radio with Deborah Becker. It was about the water at Norfolk Prison. And about 2 weeks later, we went to the prison and did a protest. 75 of us down there from 5 different organizations. Everybody was yelling on the bullhorn. I took my turn on the bullhorn. I was on there, and I was yelling, "Shut this shithole down." Everybody was chanting, you know. I didn't start the chant, by the way. Someone else started, but I liked the words. And I had the bullhorn in my... So we were all yelling, and across the street at the prison, all the administrators are filming and watching and seeing Greg Diatchenko out in the front of the prison, the guy who just did nearly 30 years at Norfolk, right, yelling about the prison conditions outside the prison on a bullhorn with a whole bunch of people in the community. So I know that went up their asses sideways. And we had the demonstration that day. We all left. Everybody went home. A week later, I had gone up to Maine. I was at a memorial service for my cousin's daughter. She had passed away at the age of 24 years old on a drug overdose on my birthday during the Super Bowl in 2018. And I went up to Maine, and it was a somber affair. It wasn't a party. Nobody was up there to party. It was a somber event. I loved my cousin's daughter dearly. We were very close. And I was drinking up there. I'm not going to deny it, you know. Someone offered me a beer. At first I declined, but then later on as the day was going through, I started drinking. And I went home.
Alcohol is a legal substance.
It's a legal substance, but it's against my parole condition.
It was a stipulation.
It's a stipulation of parole. And they do that to a lot of guys on parole, you know. So it was a stipulation of parole. But I was drinking up in Maine. I came home that night. I put on a hockey game. I was drinking some more at my house. Like I said, it was a very somber day and very sad. And the next morning, on a Sunday morning, my phone rang, and it was the parole officer. And he said, "Greg, I'm outside your back door." And I said, "I'll be right with you in a minute." And I hung the phone up and I said, "Shit." And I run into the bathroom.
Brushing your tongue and shit?
No, I just wash my face, run some water through my hair, comb my hair, and I grab mouthwash. Listerine has alcohol in it.
Yeah.
And I start, because I'm trying to mask, no lie, the alcohol smell from the night before. I know it's on my body, you know. And I go out, and I'm in my underwear and my shorts, you know, and I go out, and I go to the back door, and I open it, and as soon as I open the door, I said, "I'm going back to prison." There was 2 parole officers outside my back door. Not one. It wasn't just a home check.
And they didn't even know you was drinking. They just were going to lock you up regardless.
They were going to lock me up regardless. They were there to lock me up. I mean, 2 parole officers show up. They're there to lock me up. So they come in the house and they said, when you leave the state for any amount of time, which I had only been out of the state of Massachusetts the day before was, I think, 10 hours, 12 hours, you have to submit to a breathalyzer. So I blew into the thing. Mind you, I just gargled with mouthwash. Listerine that has alcohol in it. I just gargled with it. And I blew a .138. And they turned me around and they cuffed me up in my underwear. They dressed me. My mother came running down. I called for my mother. She came running down the stairs. She was screaming and crying. She was terrified, horrified that I was going back. I told her, I said, "Call the lawyer." I gave her my phone. I said, call the lawyer. Tell him I'm going back. It was very sad to see my mother like that, you know. And but you know, the drinking aside, and I get it. I was wrong for drinking out on parole. Aside of that, they were coming to my house to arrest me for protesting, for exercising my First Amendment protected activities that I was doing. because not one other person was arrested that day or any other day after that. You know, I put a target on my back. I admit it. I put a target on my back. You know.
Yeah.
And they retaliated against me. I call it pure retaliation.
So yeah, they did. They didn't. You know, and that's kind of, you know, it seems that, you know, that's the attitude a lot of times is, whereas, you know, you're exercising your First Amendment rights, but, you know, like, because of your history, they're going to use that to punish you where they can't punish anybody else because they got nothing on them.
Exactly. So what happened was everybody stayed in touch with me while I was inside. My friends took care of me. All the people that I'd met while I was out doing activism work, they all stood by me. And the whole time I was inside, you know, they took care of my canteen account, you know, bought me a TV, you know, clothes, whatever I needed to get by for however long I was going to endure being back inside. You know, no one knew. You know, I have to go to a parole hearing. And it just strengthened, when that happened to me, I was so upset. It strengthened my resolve to fight even more against the system. The oppression of our criminal and justice system, you know. And I came back out here in 2020, and I was right back in the move. I was right back with my friends, you know, going to protests, you know, marching on the State House from Roxbury. 3 weeks ago, we just marched on the State House on the No New Women's Prison campaign, the Free Her campaign, through Families for Justice's Housing, for Justice's Healing, and standing up for racial justice. You know, we're all involved. We don't want a $50 million prison built in Massachusetts. We want the resources, all those monies, those funds to go to helping people out, not locking them up, you know. And that's what we need out here right now. So that's one of the things we've been fighting mostly on right now out here. I'm trying to find a job. I don't have a job, you know. I've been out of work for 4 months. I'm hurting badly. I have medical issues with my back and other things. But other than that, listen, I'm in the struggle out here, but I'm continuing the fight. I'm not going to stop, you know. We have events coming up soon, you know, and some canvassing in the neighborhoods, you know, over the Free Her campaign. And I'll be there. You know, that's what I do. You know, I show up.
Okay. I got a couple more questions. One I want to touch on is because you have insight in where a lot of other people don't, is you saw the prison system evolve over a period of time. What was the difference, like, over time, like the type of criminal you saw in the beginning to the type of criminal that you were seeing towards the end in the prison system?
I saw guys that, when you came into prison, didn't matter what race you were, right? Everybody talks about all the blacks and this and that, Spanish, and everybody stayed. Listen, I came into prison, I had problems. I had problems with everybody, whites, blacks, you know. I had a couple fights in my early days, you know. People thought they were going to strong arm me, and I fought back. I did what I had to do, and that's how you gain your respect, you know. There was a trust, though. There was a trust among the population, the prison population. And the administrators over time, what they did is they instilled this snitch system thing where if you tell on people, you will get rewarded. So people doing lengthy sentences, or, you know, they get caught up in drug dealing and they're facing disciplinary actions, they're giving up other people in the prison. So there was, starting in the mid-1980s, around 85, 86, I started seeing where people were losing a sense of trust over each other. You didn't know if the people you were hanging with, you could trust them. Not to run to the ips and tell them everything that's going on.
So 85, like, you know, like there wasn't like that solidarity anymore. Nobody knew who was good and who wasn't.
Yeah, it started around that time. You know, a lot of people were into dealing drugs. There was a lot of heroin in the prison. People were cutting the other dealers out of their action. They wanted to cut them out. I know cases. I'm not even going to talk about it, but I know specific people who told on others, got them busted for dealing heroin in prison so they could keep their own business going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, you didn't know to trust, you know? And those people have to walk around with that shame. They walk around with that on their shoulders. The rest, you know, some of them are still in prison now to this day, I'm sure. They have to walk around with that, knowing they were a rat, you know, going around telling on people. But it came to a point where you couldn't trust anybody.
So, like, they couldn't trust people. What about, like, from, like, 85 up until, like, maybe, like, when you started to see this drug epidemic? Because, like, you know, like, the drugs are huge now. It's a big part of my project.
Well, it started with the crack, remember? Right? So people are getting charged with possession of crack, which, you know, the government's making it more to be a more dangerous drug than powdered cocaine. You know, so there was the discrepancy in like all the sentencing was like this big crackdown. You know, the war on drugs. We're going to lock everybody up, and what they did was they locked everybody up in the poor neighborhoods. You know, because it was the poor neighborhoods that they were the people that could afford crack and not regular powdered cocaine. You know, I'm not into cocaine. I've never really indulged in any of that.
So you saw like during like when like the whole crack epidemic came and that you
Truth in
started
sentencing, all that stuff.
You saw like more impoverished people coming from like maybe some of like the black communities.
Yep, all the
Spanish.
black communities. Yep, disproportionate number of people. Very, you know, outweighed the number of whites. The ratio. You know, and a lot of them for drug crimes. You know, and homicide too. But you know, because of gang violence, obviously. You know, within the neighborhoods. You know, drugs and all that lead to gang violence. You know, very sad story. But a lot of the guys that I met over the years inside, they were in for drugs and killing and whatnot. And everything had to do with, you know, the ills of their neighborhood, you know, meaning the drugs being pumped into their neighborhoods by the government, you know. That's what they do, you know. And it's a way to exploit people and to make money, you know. And all of a sudden, you see by the early 2000s, you see prisons, they're no longer just a place to punish people, lock them up and throw the key away. Now it's a place to make money, for businesses to make money.
Okay.
You know, Canteen Corporation, Keefe Corporation. Families don't send anything to their loved ones inside anymore like they used to, clothes and televisions and radios and all that. Everything you have to purchase through Keefe Corporation. Everybody has to purchase everything they buy, clothes, commissary, phones, everything. You know, the phone, to be able to talk on the phone, everything you do has to be purchased. You know, it's a big burden on people's families on the inside, you know. Because guys on the inside don't have jobs for the most part. There's very little work in prison. So people rely on their loved ones, their wives, their spouses, you know, whatever. Family, the father and mother, children, you know, they'll put money in your account. That's the only way you're going to survive in there. There's no hustle anymore inside. You know. There's a lot of thievery that goes on inside nowadays. You know, you can't trust anybody. That last 2.5 years that I went back in on this parole violation, just in the 2.5 years I'd been out between 2015 and 2018, right? I went back inside. I was an MCI Shirley, medium, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing in there. I was in the twilight zone. You know, the drugs, the whole deal.
What kind of drugs was in there?
Well, they used that. I'm sure there was some fentanyl, you know, being brought in, you know, mostly from the guards, I like to say, because it's families that aren't really bringing the drugs inside prisons. But what's the drug they use?
The strips?
What are the strips called?
Suboxone.
Suboxone. So Suboxone become this big thing inside there, you know, and everybody's stealing from each other so they can get all the Suboxone. I had cellmates. I had guys in my cell that moved to my cell, and I tell them right out, I said, listen, they breaking up their little strip on the table and getting high, and I tell them, listen, when they shake this cell down, and they find anything in here, you better own up to it, because I'm not taking a fall for any drugs. I don't do this stuff. I am not going to take a fall for it. Oh yeah, don't worry about it, you know, blah blah blah, and all this and that. But that's what I had to tell cellmates, because almost every cellmate I ever had up there, and I had a lot of them, every one of them was on Suboxone, doing Suboxone. They were all heroin addicts. And
then were they given Suboxone out at the prison, or it was all coming in contraband?
That came later. The courts ruled, or the legislature, somebody said that those who had pre-existing medical conditions with, you know, drug use, substance use disorders, that upon entry into the prison they could get Suboxone. So they were giving out Suboxone. People would go to the med line and get Suboxone.
So eventually they just gave it out.
But no, because people that came in prior to the ruling, they weren't grandfathered.
Oh, so you had to come in after, okay.
If you came in after the ruling, then you could go to the, you know, and tell your counselor or whoever, hey, listen, I got this addiction, you know, blah, blah. And they would have to go through medical and all that and get you approved for Suboxone. But a lot of guys in there were in there before that ruling, and they're not allowed to be part of that.
Okay.
You know? So they're the ones still running around the prison, going to the guys that do get the Suboxone, the stuff that's being brought in illegally. They, it was a nightmare up there.
Just a big Suboxone trade.
People stole from me too in there, you know. I mean, I get all these years in prison. I got people come steal out of my cell. Are you kidding me? I used to be at Norfolk. I'd have all my stuff in my cell. I'd never lock my locker. Nothing. I never worried about anybody stealing anything. I lived in a lifers unit too, by the way, so that was a big thing. But it was just amazing the change I saw in 2.5 years since I had left prison. But it just really picked up with the Suboxone and all that. And I'm sure it's still out of control in me right now.
So, like, we touched on a lot of things, man, and I really appreciate you sitting here and talking to me today. You are a power of example. You fought for yourself and you changed your life. My last question is, like, if you got a message to anybody, like, out there, like, what do you have to say about, like, your experiences and advice you could give to others out there, and also like what is, like, your plans for the future?
My plans for the future? I don't know about the future. I'm basically living day to day. Listen, it hasn't all been all that bad. Even the incarceration aspect of it. There were good times and bad times. And that's the same for people out here in the community. I don't know. I just I'm out here to try to help make change in the system. I work hard with people. People deserve second chances. There's a lot of guys inside right now, but I wish they were out here in the community, because the taxpayers out here, the people that are concerned about all the crime and all that, they would love to have these guys that I did time with out in the community out here. Because guess what? We're already out here. Am I robbing a bank down the street, man? Am I knocking an old lady's purse over here, on the sidewalk? That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like that. That's not how it works. That's not how the system works. Guys go in there, put their time in, right? Spend years thinking about what the fucking hell they did, like I did, right? Okay? And if they're up to it, which most of them are, and I'll tell you a whole bunch of them are, because I was there, they're up for making a change in their lives and doing the right thing, and staying away from disciplinary reports and just trying to, and hoping that one day, against all hope, that they would get a chance for freedom. And I'll tell you something, there's a lot of people in there right now that we would love to have out here in the community. And there's a bunch of us out here now, Some guys got exonerated in their crimes, after 40 years in prison. And they're out here in the community. And they're doing wonderful things, No bitterness. No bitterness. What I did was wrong. I own up to that. I accept what I did, But I'm not that same person I was when I was a 17-year-old kid. I'm going to be 60 years old in a couple months. I was 17 when I went away. And I grew up inside with responsibilities. I worked, like I said, 27 years in a plumbing shop. On call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wake you up at 2 in the morning for a busted steam pipe and you're off to work. I work like anybody out here in the community. Try to live my life as much as I could, just like everybody else, And I got to tell you, it paid off. It paid off when that juvenile ruling came down in Miller versus Alabama. Diatchenko versus the district attorney for the Suffolk County, in Massachusetts. In my case, I never saw that coming. I thought I was going to die inside, and here I am sitting in South Boston.
So anything's possible, and, like, for the people that watch, let them know that there's still people in there that have, worked hard to better themselves, that might deserve a second chance out here.
There's a lot of people on the inside that work hard to better themselves, and they are deserving of a second chance. However, there's also people out here in the community that have never experienced a day in jail, or maybe they have one day or a night at the police station, right? But they're out here struggling out on the street. I see it every day out here, I mean, I rode down here to Milnia Boulevard on the way down here today. And I just see everybody out there, they're all shooting shit in their arms and doing whatever, and smoking whatever they're smoking. And they deserve a chance too,
Give them the help and the chance. You know. All right.
They deserve a chance too, you know. They need housing. They need government assistance. You know, listen, man, help them out. You know, we don't need them sitting in a jail for something, you know, that could have been avoided.
Or sitting out in the street, like openly using drugs.
Openly using drugs when people are driving by. It's not something we need to see every day, you know. We can fix that situation. We can remedy that.
All right.
I believe that. It takes a lot of work, but we can do it.
I believe it too, and that's why we're out here. But we're coming up on time here, so I'm gonna give you some space. Is there anything else you want to share on the interview? Anything else you want to share with the people?
No, just that I'm glad to be out here. You know, I'm in the struggle. Things have not been easy for me. You know, everything's day to day, but I get work where I can find it. Right now, at this time, I don't have a job, but you know, like I said, I try to be responsible and do what I have to do while I'm out here. You know, and I'm going to keep doing that.
All right. Well, if anybody wants to, you know, do you want to give them your information in a way that they can reach you? They could reach out to me, and I could reach out to you.
I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook. If they want, I have an email address.
Go ahead, say it.
It's Gregory Diatchenko, DIATCHENKO @gmail.com, and you can reach out to me. You know.
All right, cool.
If you have any questions or anything like that, you know, hey, I'm always open to sharing and talking. You know, I'm always open for that.
Greg, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. I'll give you a handshake here through the
All right.
through the camera.
Thanks, Marshall, man. Thanks.